I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm a poor student. And God has to give me His test over again. Say, take that lesson again. Teach me thy way, Lord, till I learn it. I thank you, Melanie, for that song. Turn with me in your Bibles, if you would, to the book of Judges, chapter 4. The book of Judges, chapter 4. We've been looking at the Judges of the Old Testament. This morning, we'd like to look at 3 characters as we see Judges chapter 4 and Judges chapter 5. Alexander Dumas's book, The Three Musketeers, is a swashbuckling genre which has heroic, chivalrous swordsmen who fight for justice. The Three Musketeers is primarily a historical and adventure novel. We remember Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, the famous musketeers. And of course, through the years, they've made a number of movies and films in relation to that book. Even though the book is called The Three Musketeers, I wondered why there's 4, counting D'Artagnan, who is really the star of the book. I would call this sermon the 3 Musketeers, or should I say characters, of the Old Testament. Because God uses in chapter 4 and 5 3 characters to accomplish deliverance from the Canaanites. And what is interesting about our 3 characters is that 2 of them are women, and 1 is a reluctant deliverer himself. 1 is a Jew, 1 is a Gentile, and 1 is a man that God has chosen to be a leader, but is backward and timid and has weak faith. Yet he is mentioned, in fact, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. So let me share with you in our story about these 3 characters. The first one is our judge. We call him Barak. He is from the tribe of Naphtali. He is backward, shy, and unassuming. He is afraid to take the leadership, as so many men are in these days, and certainly in that day. God uses him in spite of his weaknesses, deferring to Deborah, and Deborah wants him to take leadership, and he finally does, while Deborah stands watching and encouraging. Our second judge, we know, is Deborah, of course. We looked at her last week. And again, she is a woman of faith and of courage. She teaches God's word under a tree. And as people come from all over Israel to the tree to hear the word of God, men, women, and children whose hearts are hungry, whose hearts hear the word of God as it brings judgment to their hearts and to their lives. And as she continually reads and interprets the scripture, she is called in Judges chapter 5 by herself the mother of Israel. And then we have a third character that God uses. In fact, she is a Gentile. She is called Jael. She is not even an Israelite. She is a Kenite. Once again, God uses a Gentile to help bring deliverance to his people. The Kenites, you remember, were relatives of Moses through Jethro, his father-in-law. As we proceed in our story, we'll see that the Kenites were supposedly neutral in this story, but this family turned out to be participants in the deliverance of God's people. But as we look in Judges chapter 4, let's look, if we would, at the first 3 verses at Israel's wickedness. Israel's wickedness. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. Again, as we see Israel's offense, once again they fall into this cycle. As God brings deliverance through Ehud, and as they cry out to the Lord, and God raises up a judge. But no sooner than Ehud is dead and God is blessing, then they begin to kind of slip away. Isn't it funny that Christianity is similar to that even in this day? It wasn't persecution that hurt the church, it was prosperity. And often when things are good and God is blessing, we have a tendency to forget who brought us to where we are, who has helped us, who has made us to prosper, and who has delivered us. And sadly to say, I would say, even in America, that we have forgotten who has brought us to this prosperity. Oh, it's not the president. Oh, it's not the Congress. It's not our foreign policies. It's God that has blessed us, our nation, as we recognized Him and put Him first and foremost in our homes, in our families, in our laws, in our Constitution, in our pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation, under God, in our coins that say, in God we trust, and in a nation that we prayed in our schools, we prayed in our courts, we put Bible verses. In fact, over the Supreme Court is Moses, the lawgiver. And many of our buildings in Washington have reference to Bible and godliness, but yet we have now come to this place where we say, we don't need God anymore. We don't need Him in our homes. We don't need Him in our schools. We don't need Him in our courts. We don't need Him in our Congress. In fact, now, to run for president, it might be better if you were just an outright atheist, because if you stand for God and holiness, they're going to poke fun of you, and righteousness and justice and even believing God is something to be scorned, sad to say, in America. Israel's offense. Sin brought what? Servitude. Servitude. For 20 years now, Jabin and his 900 chariots now have suppressed the people of God. Now again, as we look at our story, we don't know really how big his army is. But we do know that 900 chariots of iron is a pretty massive, what we would call a cavalry, or maybe what we would call tanks in this day in which we live. In Bible times, that was a pretty big army of chariots. So as far as his foot soldiers that went along with that, so he had a pretty big army, and he did a pretty good job. And the Bible describes it in such a way as he mightily oppressed. Isn't that what sin does? It blinds us. It oppresses us. It keeps us down. Oh, and remember the theme in the book of Judges is every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Oh, and finally, they would come to themselves. And I believe as Deborah taught them the Word of God, oh, and they began to see what sin was doing. And they cried out to the Lord. But again, look at Israel's oppressor. The Bible calls him by name. His name is Jabin. He's king of the Canaanites. Now, don't misunderstand who this Jabin is of Hazor, because in the book of Joshua, we see that when the Israelites came into Canaan, you remember as they came to Jericho and they began to conquer Canaan, they moved south, west and south, and then they moved north. And in Joshua chapter 11, they came to, you remember, Hazor, and there was another king there by that exact name. You remember his name was Jabin as well. And the Bible says as they conquered Hazor, that God told him to burn Hazor with fire. Not every city in Canaan did they burn. But God, from time to time, remember the first city they burned, and then as they went north, Hazor was kind of like the capital of the northern part of the Canaanites. It was a very fortified city. But listen to what Joshua 11 and 13 says. But as for the cities that stood in their strength, Israel burned none of them, save Hazor only that did Joshua burn. So again, this king has passed off the scene. But another king comes back to the same city, and he has the same name. But this is not the same guy. Isn't it interesting? That's what sin does in our lives. It comes back. It comes back. And we've got to deal with it. And how do we deal with it? We cry out to the Lord. And that's what Israel began to do. They say, Lord, we need your help. But see, understand, as we read in our story, that Jabin's general is Sisera. He has his headquarters in Harosheth of the Gentiles. It's west of the valley of Jezreel, or what we would understand as Megiddo. Now you remember the valley of Jezreel, or the valley of Megiddo, is that huge valley in the land of Canaan, where one of these days God says the battle of Armageddon is going to take place. He has 900 chariots of iron, and he has harassed and enslaved God's people once again. Now, how does that affect us today? Now, remember that sin enslaves. And they were enslaved because of their disobedience and idolatry. Remember, our three enemies can enslave us as well. The world, the flesh, and the devil. And how important it is that you and I realize that we are in a spiritual conflict as well. Oh, we have three enemies that will seek to destroy or enslave us as God's people. The world, the flesh, and the devil. I remember what one professor told me in school many years ago. He said, the devil doesn't bother most Christians. He said, because he knows the world and the flesh is doing a good job with them. Oh, we have the world where Paul said to be not conformed to this world. And the word conform there means to shape one thing like another. We have a pull of the world to conform, to be like them, to dress like them, to act like them, to sing like them. And now there's a pressure upon the church to worship like the world, sing like the world, dress like the world, make the world feel comfortable in the church. There's nothing that saps the power and the strength and the might in a Christian's life than compromise. Compromise. That's another sermon in itself. But then we have the flesh. The world may attack us from that without, but the flesh attacks us from the within. And Paul said, I know that is in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. And even Galatians 5:17, Paul said, the spirit and the flesh, they're contrary one to another, like a wrestling match. I'm not talking about this stuff you see on TV where they're throwing chairs and, all that bunch of foolishness. I'm talking about an Olympic wrestling match. And the flesh and the spirit, if you're saved and know the Lord, if the Apostle Paul had trouble with his flesh, where do you think we stand? He's there. He's going to stick his ugly head up in your life on a regular basis. And Jesus told us, take up your cross daily and follow me. What do you do on a cross? You crucify somebody. And that's why Paul said in Colossians 3:5, mortify the deeds of the flesh. Put them to death. And the way to get victory in the Christian life is get up every morning and have a funeral. And that's the flesh. Paul said to walk in the Spirit. And that word walk is in the imperative. It's a command. Walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. We have three enemies. But as we see in this story about Israel and their wickedness, we too can get enslaved. But look at Israel's woman of faith. Look in verse 4. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. And she went and dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Now notice what she did in verse 6. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Benoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 of the children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun. Now notice the person that God uses. That's why I've enjoyed studying the Judges. God chose to use Deborah as a leader, as a deliverer. But God would, through Deborah, also choose to use Barak. But I like what Warren Wiersbe said. God chose judges that we might have overlooked. If the choice was up to us, a left-handed Ehud, a farmer named Shamgar, who was a Gentile, and now a prophetess named Deborah. You see, man looks on the outward appearance. We're impressed with physique. We're impressed with names. We're impressed with what have you accomplished. We're impressed with outward things. Remember the story of David and his brothers? And as Jesse brought his sons before Samuel, and I can see Samuel, yeah, this is him. Look at this broad shoulder. Look at that big man. And God said, nope, not him. Well, maybe this is him. Nope. And next. And then it goes on. Next. You got any more? Oh, the youngest is over there keeping sheep. I'm going to stand here till you get him. Here comes this little red-headed young fellow, probably not even shaven yet, stinking and smelling like sheep. He walks up with his shepherd's staff. He said, yes, Dad, you called? We know the rest of the story, don't we? Oh, to realize that God sees the heart. And as God sees your heart, and what is sad is often the talented, the gifted, the able, often learn to depend upon their flesh. So God often says, well, I'm looking for somebody who's just willing. Are you willing? Deborah was willing. But notice the place that God used his people. God had a place he wanted the people of Israel to go, and Deborah told them. Notice in verse 6, she told him from the Lord where to go and what to do. Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee the 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and the children of Zebulun. Verse 7, and I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon, Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. Now here God has told Deborah, go get Barak and go to Mount Tabor. Now you have to understand geographically what God has just told Deborah to do and his people. Remember, the valley of Jezreel is here. Well, let's just say here is the town, what did he say, where was Harosheth, of the Gentiles. And then right in front is the valley of Jezreel, a plain, goes for miles. And on the other end is Mount Tabor. And God tells Deborah to go get Barak and to tell him to, you meet at Mount Tabor, and that I want you to come down out of the mountain into the valley of Jezreel and meet these 900 chariots and the army of the Canaanites. Again, someone said, God blesses the place of obedience. Obedience. I'm reminded of the story of 1 Kings chapter 17 and verse 3. You remember when there was a famine in the land and God had brought judgment to Israel because of their sin and wickedness once again. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah. He said, get thee hence and turn thee eastward and go hide thyself. Now that's kind of like go hide yourself. By the brook Cherith that is before Jordan. And it shall be that when thou shalt drink of the brook, I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. That's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. The ravens. God told Elijah, Elijah, there I've commanded the ravens to feed thee there. Where is the there? The place of obedience. When you and I obey the Word of God, we find ourselves there, right where we need to be. On Sunday morning, in the middle of a pandemic, if God is able and our health is able and we're able, and there is right here in the house of God, the place of obedience. There is when you walk out and say, Lord, I want to put you first in my finances. And there is the place of obedience as I give. There, where God places you, where he puts you, on your job, in obedience as a witness, as a testimony for the glory of God, that you are obedient to his word. You see, Saul, God found out, or he found out. You remember when Samuel said to obey is better than the sacrifice. You see, God looked at the sheep and he heard the sheep. It's funny with my grandchildren, they're learning all the animal noises, and I turned the book and little Scarlett, she's telling me now, what's that? And I said, no, I say what's that. You give the answer. What's that? I said, that's a sheep. What's that? A cow. What's that? A goat. I said, no. I say what's that, and you say the noise. So she was just, we got it backwards, but she loves saying, what's that? And God said, what's that I hear, Saul? Sheep. And Saul says, oh, God, I can offer these sheep as sacrifice to the Lord. Won't that be wonderful? And God says to Saul through Samuel, to obey is better than the sacrifice. It's like when you tell your children to go get the family Bible and they come back with the TV guide. Do they even have TV guides anymore? I don't know. No, I told you what to do. Obedience. Obedience. And God said, Samuel, no, or Saul, to obey is better than the sacrifice. God blesses the obedient. When you and I obey the Lord, God will bless. Not only was Deborah in the place of obedience And she told God's people, this is God's plan. The plan that God used. Now again, sometimes God's plan doesn't seem like it makes sense to us. You know why? Because His ways are far above ours, Isaiah said. Sometimes God's will and way doesn't make sense. And we don't want to do it. Lord, this doesn't make sense. But to understand, again, listen to what God told them to do. Now you tell me how this sounds. They are to gather at Mount Tabor, come down out of the mountain, and meet the Canaanites in 900 chariots out in the open field. The opposite, if you were an Israelite, would have been better. Chariots can operate in the mountains and in the valleys. And God says, no, I don't want to do it that way. I have a plan. I have a plan. You see, I don't know if this goes here or not. I had it somewhere else, but it kind of helps me see. There are some that didn't go for this plan. And we'll see that in the Song of Deborah. There were some of the tribes that said, not us, we're not doing that. We're not going. But God said, come down out of the mountains and meet them by the river Kishon. You see, it's the dry season. And, but you know what God was going to do? Deborah tells us in the Song of Deborah, chapter 5 and verse 20. Look in Judges chapter 5 and verse 20. And they fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. And the river Kishon swept them away. That ancient river, the river Kishon. O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. Then were the horse hoofs broken by the means of the prancings and the prancings of their mighty men. Mighty ones. Again, here's what Warren Wiersbe said. The water and the mud would severely impede the mobility of the Canaanite chariots and horses. And this situation would make it easier for the Israelites to attack and slaughter the enemy. Isn't that like God? God says, you obey. And here they come, these 900 chariots. And who knows, God only knows, He didn't tell us for some reason, how many, that was in the charioteer. God only knows how many other thousands of troops they had. As they march out against the Israelites, here come the Israelites, about 10,000, or we know there were more that came to join, as she tells us in the Song of Deborah, when all of a sudden, weather changed history. I watched that show a number of years ago. I tell my kids one of my favorite channels is the Weather Channel. And they had a show called When Weather Changed History. And I spoke about that when we covered and talked about Nahum. You remember Nahum? He was a weatherman. He told Nineveh how they were going to be destroyed. It would be through a flood. And that's exactly what happened with Nineveh. And this is when weather changed history. You see, understand, as one commentator said, this was the dry season between June and September. Remember, the Canaanite god Baal was god of storms. Isn't that, does God have a sense of humor or what? God would take a severe thunderstorm in a dry season. When all of a sudden here come these chariots, the wheels are throwing up dirt and dust, and these men are screaming and hollering, and there comes a dark cloud, another dark cloud, and pretty soon it comes a torrential rain. As we say in the South, it was raining cats and dogs. And pretty soon, these 900 chariots, the river's overflowing, and their chariot wheels are getting stuck in the mud. Their horses are getting stuck in the mud. And then all of a sudden, here come the Israelites. God brings a victory. God has that kind of reputation. You remember in Exodus chapter 14 that when the Israelites were standing at the Red Sea was in front of them, the mountains on either side, and then from behind them came the armies of Pharaoh with his 600 chariots, the armies of Egypt, the mightiest army in that day. And God said, stand still to see the salvation of the Lord. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind. I'm sorry to tell you, in the Ten Commandments, it didn't happen all at once. I mean, you know, the movie. That movie had a lot of good things, but most movies don't go directly by the Bible. But it said, all that night. And made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. That's the way my God works when we obey. But notice Israel's warriors. Notice this second character that God would use in this deliverance, judge, as we would call him. You see, Barak was an unassuming leader. He was somewhat reluctant. But aren't you glad that God sometimes uses our weak faith? We get in a situation and we don't know how we're going to get out. We don't know what's going to happen. Lord, the 900 chariots, 20 years we've been enslaved, and God, I don't know if everybody's going to join in this fight and get in the mountains and come down in the valley. And you know the story. But God, through Deborah, you remember, prophesied and said, the deliverance will come from a woman. Sometimes we cry like the Father said, Lord, I believe, but help thou mine unbelief. And that's what I like about these judges, even as we march through and see these men. They weren't perfect. Don't hold up Gideon as an example of strong faith. Don't fleece the Lord like Gideon. Well, if God wants me to do so-and-so. I got in the worst trouble in my Christian life, fleecing the Lord. I remember driving through Mount Vernon, Georgia, and saying, God, if you want me to marry this girl, help me to find a car wash. That's real wisdom, isn't it? Guess what I found on the other side of Mount Vernon, Georgia? I can take you there to this day, and you'll see your car wash. Well, it wasn't God's will. But God uses us in spite of our weak faith at times. And here he did. To realize that he had deliverance. You see, Barak was from the tribe of Naphtali. He was from Kedesh. It was near Hazor, the capital of Jabin. And as one commentator said, he knew firsthand the oppression of the Canaanites. The commander. God uses us in our weak faith sometimes. But notice the company. God used Naphtali and Zebulun. But notice in chapter 5, if you have your Bible there, if you're in chapter 5, turn to verse 14. There were others of the tribes of Israel that joined in. And Deborah tells us about it in the Song of Deborah, verse 14. And out of Ephraim was there a root of them against Amalek. After thee, Benjamin among the people out of Machir came down, governors out of Zebulun, they that had handled the pen of the writer. Again, in verse 15, the princes of Issachar. Look in verse, he tells us there, Reuben. Verse 18, Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeopardized their lives unto death in the high places of the field. But interesting enough, there were 3 tribes that did not come to help. And she mentions them in her song. Verse 17, Gilead abode beyond Jordan. Why did Dan remain in ships, and Asher continue on the seashore and abode in his breeches? You see, sad to say, there are some who do not want to join the fight. They have seen the huge army, the 900 chariots of iron. God's ways seem impractical, and they don't want to do it. They'd rather fight their own way, their own lives. Fighting in the mountains would have been in the Israelites' favor. They may have said, this is ridiculous to fight in the open field against 900 chariots of iron. Obeying God doesn't make sense sometimes. But obey is better than to sacrifice. And God's will is always better than mine. But notice the third companion in our story. This unassuming person steps out of the shadows. She's a Gentile. She's not even supposed to be in the conflict. Look in chapter 4 and verse 17. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber, the Kenite. And Jael went to meet Sisera and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And when he had turned in unto her to the tent, she covered him with a mantle, a blanket. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk, gave him drink, and covered him. And again he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be that when any man doth come and inquire of thee, say, Is there any man here? That thou shouldst say, No. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, took a hammer in her hand, went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it to the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. Isn't it interesting? Again, she is a Kenite. The Kenites were the in-laws of Moses. And as the Bible tells us, they were neutral in this fight. In other words, they weren't in it. But again, someone else said, He was near the tents of Heber on the border of Naphtali, about 6 miles east of Mount Tabor. Now remember where the battle took place in the valley of Jezreel. So he has fled from the valley toward Mount Tabor. It's about 6 miles headed toward, probably headed toward Hazor. And what does she do? I believe this dear woman decided to say, I'm not neutral anymore. She has a decision to make. When this ungodly man who is oppressed and afflicted and probably killed hundreds of Israelites for 20 years, he's the captain of the host of the Canaanites. And when he comes to her tent, she has a decision to make. Am I going to be neutral? Am I going to go along with this man? Am I going to protect this man? Who am I going to identify with? Didn't it sound like another lady named Rahab? That when the Israelites showed up at her door, she had a decision to make. Whose side am I on? And Jael said, you know what? Come on in. You I notice you're kind of weary and bloody, and so you need a little nap. Yep. You're kind of thirsty. You got any water? Oh, I'll give you some milk, and I'll cover you up. You can go nighty-night. And he's kind of sleeping. I imagine it doesn't take him long on the run to fall asleep. You remember in that time, it was the women that put up and down the tents. So she had put up that tent many a time, and she took that hammer and she took that nail, that spike, and as he was asleep, I don't know how many blows it took, maybe being a skilled tent putter up or whatever, she went wham! And that was the end of him. Again, one commentator said, for the commander of a Canaanite army to be killed by a woman was disgraceful. This third character, she steps forward. What is amazing about this story is God, you remember, uses three people. And it wasn't even Deborah. You would think if you and I were writing this story, we'd say Deborah would be the hero and she would be the one to kill, and that wasn't even Deborah at all. She didn't care who got the praise. In fact, if you're in Judges chapter 5, verse 24, listen to what Deborah says about Jael. Blessed among women shall Jael, the wife of Heber the Canaanite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. Maybe her husband's, next time she put up that tent, he kind of stood back a little bit and said, go to it, woman. I'm standing back. But Deborah praises her. I believe that she chose to stand with the people of God. Even though her nation was neutral in this fight, she became one of the deliverers and a fulfillment of the prophecy of Deborah. Israel's wickedness. No sooner was Ehud gone and dead, the enemy rises up and they fall into sin once again. And God raises up three people. 2 women and a man to bring deliverance. Israel's warriors. And the woman who brought the victory wasn't even an Israelite. She was a Kenite. But she made a decision to stand with God's people. How about you? Has the world enslaved you? Has the flesh enslaved you? Has the devil been hindering you? We can make a decision to say, you know what? God, I'm going to obey your word. I know it doesn't make sense to go fight in a valley when I'm fighting against 900 chariots of iron. But God, we're going to obey the Lord. And the world looks at us and says, oh, listen, come out into the world. You can have fun and you can do all these things, but I'm going to go to the house of the Lord. I'm going to live a pure and a holy life. I'm going to consecrate myself to obey God. To obey is better than the sacrifice. And Jael said, you know what? My nation may be neutral, but not me. I want to join in the fight. And she did. And Deborah put her in her song, the song of praise. Would you bow with me in prayer? God gives us a choice. God gives us a choice. You see, you're somebody's slave. You're the slave to the world. You're a slave to yourself. And then that makes us a slave to sin. And even Satan. Satan has many people bound in darkness. Oh, but remember what Judges says, that they oppress them mightily. That's what sin does. Oh, when you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. Oh, but God's people finally cried out and said, God, we're tired of this. God rose up 3 people to bring deliverance. 2 women and a reluctant man. Father, I don't know where the battles are, but Lord, you said, there I will feed you. Help us to find the place of obedience. And God will turn this world upside down to meet our needs, to take care of us. He may send the ravens, or he may even send a thunderstorm or a river to flood to meet our needs. What a God. Help us, dear Lord. Speak to hearts this morning, here and maybe through the internet. In Jesus' name.